Number 1. The Boy in the Box. Sometimes, the most profound horrors are discarded quietly among the frozen weeds of a peaceful neighborhood. It is February of 1957, and the winter air in Philadelphia is bitterly cold, biting through the coats of anyone brave enough to walk the desolate trails of the Fox Chase area. A young college student is out checking his animal traps, stepping carefully through the icy underbrush. Suddenly, his eyes catch something completely out of place. It is a large, faded cardboard box, casually tossed aside in the dirt. He approaches it slowly, assuming it is just garbage dumped by a careless local. But as he peers inside the carton, the entire world seems to stop spinning. What he finds will not only shatter the fundamental innocence of a quiet American city but will echo through the decades, haunting generations of investigators. Inside the box lies the fragile, lifeless body of a little boy, wrapped tightly in a cheap, plaid blanket. If you are fascinated by true mysteries that defy logic and chill you to the bone, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now so you never miss a case. What kind of person do you think is capable of throwing a child away like a piece of forgotten trash? Let me know your honest thoughts down in the comments below. If this tragic mystery already has you hooked, please drop a like on this video. Stick around, because the terrifying details the medical examiner is about to uncover will leave you entirely speechless. The morgue is eerily quiet, heavy with the suffocating weight of a tragedy no one can properly explain. The medical examiner begins the grim task of trying to understand the final, agonizing moments of this unnamed little boy. The physical evidence is nothing short of horrifying, painting a picture of absolute, sustained cruelty. The child is severely malnourished, his small frame bearing the devastating marks of unspeakable physical torture. He is covered in small scars, some appearing almost surgical, others looking like the aftermath of deep burns or severe, repeated beatings. His hair has been hastily chopped off, clumps of it still clinging to his pale skin, suggesting someone tried to quickly disguise his identity in a frantic rush just before his death. Even more unnerving, his hands and feet are deeply wrinkled, an eerie sign that he might have been submerged in water for a long period right before he passed away. The detectives stand in the room, absolutely baffled and heartbroken. No parents are actively looking for him. No missing persons reports match his specific description. It is as if he simply fell from the sky, a ghost child completely without a family or a voice. Why do you think a killer would go to such extreme lengths to alter a victim's appearance before abandoning them in the woods? Tell me your psychological theories in the comments section. Hit that like button right now if you are hoping for swift justice for this innocent child. Do not look away, because the massive nationwide hunt is about to uncover a deeply disturbing wall of absolute silence. The desperate detectives launch an unprecedented, massive search operation, immediately circulating hundreds of thousands of flyers with the boy's face across the entire country. They boldly include his post-mortem picture in every local newspaper and broadcast it on national television, praying that a mother, a distant relative, or a school teacher will recognize his innocent eyes. The entire nation is talking about the boy in the box. Tips flood into the Philadelphia police precinct by the thousands. Investigators work around the clock, relentlessly tracking down foster homes, traveling carnivals, and transient families passing through Pennsylvania. But every single promising lead ultimately ends in a frustrating, suffocating dead end. Someone out there knows exactly who this child is, but they are consciously choosing to remain completely silent. This profound silence itself becomes a powerful, invisible weapon, successfully protecting a ruthless monster hiding in plain sight. As the months slowly turn into years, the desperate hope of an immediate arrest begins to fade into a lingering, painful mystery. The boy is eventually buried, his gravestone marked only with the heartbreaking words, "America's unknown child." How do you think an entire community manages to keep such a horrific, dark secret completely buried for so many years? Let me know your thoughts on this collective silence down in the comments below. If the sheer frustration of this cold case is keeping you on the edge of your seat, please drop a like on this video. Stay with me, because decades of absolute darkness must pass before a miraculous scientific breakthrough changes everything. Time becomes the ultimate enemy of the investigation, as generations of seasoned detectives inherit the fading files, refusing to let the little boy be entirely forgotten. The original investigators who worked the case grow old and pass away, their dying wish always remaining the exact same: to give the boy his true name back. The killer has seemingly gotten away with the perfect crime, escaping earthly punishment by simply outliving the physical evidence. The case remains open and cold for 65 long, agonizing years. But then, it is the year 2022. Investigators turn to advanced genetic genealogy, carefully extracting a tiny, fragile sample of DNA from the boy's exhumed remains. They trace his ancestry through incredibly complex family trees, hunting down distant relatives across the country. Finally, the impossible happens. The police hold a highly emotional press conference that brings tears to the eyes of millions watching around the world. The boy in the box is no longer an unknown child. He finally has a name. His name is Joseph Augustus Sorelli. Hearing his name spoken aloud after more than 6 decades of silence is a profound, beautiful victory. However, the darkest part of this tragedy remains painfully unresolved. While Joseph finally has his identity back, the person who subjected him to such brutal torture was never caught, taking their gruesome secret to the grave. Joseph rests in peace, but the horrifying shadows of Pennsylvania do not end in the freezing woods, leading us next to a chilling reality seeping from a locked, subterranean basement where an urban predator built a terrifying house of horrors. Number 2. Gary Heidnik. Those 6 women were violently dragged into a terrifying basement right beneath a quiet city street, where an unimaginable nightmare was just beginning. The year is 1987, and the bustling city of Philadelphia is completely unaware of the absolute evil hiding in plain sight. Gary Heidnik appeared to be an eccentric but harmless man to his neighbors. He was a strange individual, but nobody could have ever predicted the darkness rotting inside his mind. Heidnik began targeting vulnerable women, those who were struggling and desperate for a helping hand. He offered them food, a ride, or a safe place to stay, drawing them in with a false sense of security. But the moment they stepped inside his house, the carefully constructed mask fell off. The heavy door would slam shut, the deadbolt would click, and these women instantly realized they had walked straight into a trap. He forced them down into a cold, damp basement that felt more like a medieval dungeon than a normal home. Once at the bottom of the stairs, the true scope of his madness was revealed. They were placed in heavy metal chains, completely stripped of their freedom. Imagine realizing that the person offering you salvation is actually your worst nightmare. What goes through a person's mind when the door locks and there is no way out? Let me know below. If you are already feeling the dread of this claustrophobic trap, drop a like on this video right now. The horrific secret he kept hidden deep beneath the floorboards was worse than any horror movie ever made. Heidnik did not just chain these women to the walls, he engineered a personalized hell just for them. In the center of the basement floor, he had dug a deep, narrow pit. Whenever the women disobeyed his bizarre rules, they were forced into this dark hole, covered with heavy wooden planks, and left in absolute, terrifying pitch blackness. He subjected his captives to unspeakable physical and psychological torture, breaking down their minds day after day. The air was thick with despair, the agonizing sound of clanking chains echoing through the cold room. It was a scene of such profound depravity that it would eventually inspire the iconic villain Buffalo Bill in the famous Hollywood film The Silence of the Lambs. But for these women, this was not a movie. 2 of the captives could not survive the sheer brutality. Heidnik ruthlessly murdered them, leaving the remaining women to witness the horrifying fate that awaited them all. They were entirely dependent on a monster who enjoyed playing God with their lives. Every single footstep on the floorboards above meant the door was about to open, bringing another wave of unbearable pain. The survivors had to pretend to be completely broken just to stay alive. How long do you think a person can survive in pure darkness before completely losing their mind? Let me know below. If this terrifying reality is sending shivers down your spine, drop a like right now. One woman finally saw a tiny window of opportunity, but her daring escape plan was a matter of life and death. Among the surviving captives was a woman named Josefina Rivera. She knew that fighting Heidnik physically was impossible, so she decided to outsmart him. Through sheer, unimaginable willpower, Josefina slowly convinced her captor that she was completely loyal to him. She played a dangerous psychological game, gaining his trust inch by agonizing inch, pretending to be his willing accomplice. Her incredible patience finally paid off when Heidnik made a fatal mistake. Believing she would not run, he temporarily unchained her and allowed her to accompany him outside the house. Walking side by side with the very monster who had tortured her friends was the most terrifying moment of her life. She knew this was her only chance. If she failed, he would drag her back to the pit and kill her. The moment Heidnik looked away, Josefina bolted. She ran for her life, her heart pounding, until she finally flagged down the police. When she frantically described the dungeon, the chains, and the pit, the officers initially struggled to believe that such an elaborate chamber of horrors could exist right under their noses in a normal neighborhood. Could you have kept your composure while walking next to a serial killer just waiting for the right moment to run? Let me know below. If you are amazed by her incredible bravery and desperate fight for survival, hit that like button right now. The police finally breached the front door, and the nightmare they found inside would scar them for the rest of their lives. Officers descended upon the quiet street, weapons drawn, and kicked down the door to Heidnik's house. As they carefully made their way down the creaking wooden stairs into the basement, they were hit by the overwhelming stench of death and decay. The sight before them was completely unbelievable. 3 terrified, emaciated women were still chained to the walls, shivering in the cold dampness of the room. The infamous pit was exactly where Josefina had described it. The officers quickly freed the surviving captives, bringing them up into the sunlight they had not seen for months. Gary Heidnik was immediately arrested, his reign of terror finally brought to a sudden end. The entire neighborhood was left in a state of absolute shock. People who had waved to him every single morning realized they had been living next door to a genuine psychopath. The trial was a media circus, exposing the gruesome details of his crimes to a disgusted public. He was found guilty of 2 murders and multiple counts of kidnapping and torture. The court showed him absolutely no mercy. He was sentenced to death, and in 1999, he was executed, taking his darkest secrets to the grave. The House of Horrors was eventually demolished, leaving an empty lot where so much innocent blood was spilled. But while this case proved that monsters can hide in a dark city basement, our next story shows that pure evil can also live in a sprawling mansion, where a wealthy young man lured 4 innocent boys to a massive, isolated farm for a deadly, fiery trap.
Number 3. Bucks County Murders. Pure evil can also live in a sprawling mansion, where a wealthy young man lured 4 innocent boys to a massive, isolated farm for a deadly, fiery trap. In the scorching summer of 2017, the picturesque community of Bucks County, Pennsylvania, was shattered by an unprecedented wave of fear. Over just a few days, 4 separate young men vanished without a single trace. These were normal kids with bright futures, deeply loved by their families. Panic began to spread like wildfire across the county as missing person posters flooded every street corner and dominated social media feeds. The entire state was on high alert, frantically searching for any clue. The investigation quickly pointed toward the sprawling, 90-acre rural estate owned by the wealthy DiNardo family. At the center of this dark web was 20-year-old Cosmo DiNardo, a young man who had everything money could buy, but harbored a deeply disturbed mind. He presented himself as an untouchable figure, flashing his wealth and weapons online. Under the guise of lucrative marijuana deals, Cosmo invited these young men to his family's isolated farm, promising a quick exchange. But the boys had absolutely no idea they were driving straight into a calculated slaughter. Would you ever trust a casual acquaintance enough to drive to a remote, empty property late at night? Let me know below. If you can feel the mounting tension of this frantic search, drop a like right now. The vast fields of the farm were keeping a terrifying secret, and the police were about to dig up an absolute nightmare. Cosmo did not act entirely alone in this gruesome rampage. He enlisted the help of his cousin, Sean Kratz, to execute his twisted fantasies. As each victim arrived at the sprawling estate, The cousins were waiting in the shadows, armed and devoid of human empathy. There was no negotiation and absolutely no mercy. The moment the victims stepped out of their vehicles, they were ambushed and ruthlessly gunned down in cold blood. The sheer callousness of the executions was deeply chilling. Cosmo, a rich kid pretending to be a hardened gangster, treated human life as if it were a meaningless game. After the fatal shots rang out, the panic of hiding the massive crime set in. The cousins desperately attempted to cover their tracks, dragging the lifeless bodies across the dirt. In a horrifying display of brutality, they placed the victims into a makeshift pig roaster, poured gasoline over them, and ignited a roaring fire. When the flames failed to completely destroy the evidence, they used a heavy backhoe to bury the charred remains deep beneath the earth. They casually went back to their privileged lives as if nothing happened, while 4 families desperately begged the public for help finding their sons. How could 2 young men commit such savage acts and then simply go home to eat dinner with their family? Let me know below. If the cold-blooded nature of these executions is making your stomach turn, hit that like button right now. The authorities were finally closing in on the property, and what they unearthed would break the heart of the entire nation. As the desperate search reached a fever pitch, law enforcement from across the state converged on the massive DiNardo property. Helicopters circled above, and heavily armed tactical units secured the perimeter. The sheer size of the 90-acre farm made the search incredibly difficult, but the police refused to give up. They brought in specialized cadaver dogs, trained to detect the faintest scent of human remains hidden deep underground. For days, the investigators endured the sweltering July heat, sifting through the soil inch by agonizing inch. The tension was suffocating, as everyone silently prayed the boys would be found alive, though the dark reality was becoming impossible to ignore. Suddenly, the dogs signaled near a freshly disturbed patch of earth. As the digging began, the horrific truth was finally dragged out of the darkness. The brutalized bodies of the 4 missing young men were pulled from their deep, muddy grave. The discovery sent shockwaves of pure grief across the country. Surrounded by overwhelming evidence, the illusion of Cosmo's untouchable power completely collapsed. Facing the terrifying prospect of the death penalty, his arrogance vanished, replaced by a desperate cowardice. He quickly confessed to the gruesome murders in exchange for sparing his own miserable life. Do you think a full confession should ever save a brutal killer from facing the ultimate punishment? Let me know your thoughts below. If you are gripped by the intense, agonizing search for these boys, drop a like right now. The grieving families finally had to face the killers in court, and the final sentencing brought a wave of overwhelming emotion. The courtroom was heavy with unspeakable sorrow as the grieving families finally came face to face with the monster who destroyed their lives. There were tears of profound anguish and voices trembling with rage as mothers and fathers addressed the smug, wealthy killer. Despite his privileged upbringing and expensive defense attorneys, Cosmo DiNardo could not buy his way out of this nightmare. He was sentenced to 4 consecutive life terms in a maximum security prison without the absolute possibility of parole, ensuring he will take his final breath behind cold steel bars. His cousin, Sean Kratz, who stood by and actively participated in the slaughter, also received a life sentence for his direct role in the horrific massacre. The sprawling family farm, once a symbol of immense wealth and status, is now forever stained by the innocent blood spilled upon its soil. The Bucks County murders remain a terrifying reminder that the lure of easy money can sometimes be a one-way ticket to a brutal, shallow grave. The crime shattered the illusion of safety in an affluent community, proving that pure psychopathy does not care about your zip code or your bank account. 4 young lives were extinguished simply because a rich kid wanted to feel powerful. But while this horrific tragedy unfolded on an isolated, rural estate driven by greed and pure arrogance, the next unimaginable nightmare took place in a peaceful, secluded religious village where a heavily armed delivery driver stormed into a tiny one-room schoolhouse and took 10 innocent little girls hostage.
Number 4. The Amish school shooting. The next unimaginable nightmare took place in a peaceful, secluded religious village where a heavily armed delivery driver stormed into a tiny one-room schoolhouse and took 10 innocent little girls hostage. The year is 2006, and the quiet community of nickel mines, Pennsylvania, operates far removed from the chaos of modern society. Here, horse-drawn buggies travel down dirt roads, and life is defined by deep faith and absolute pacifism. On a crisp October morning, the children of the West Nickel Mines School were settling into their wooden desks, expecting a day of simple learning. But the tranquility of their isolated world was about to be shattered by an outsider bringing unimaginable violence. A local milk truck driver named Charles Carl Roberts, a man familiar to the community, parked outside the building. Armed with multiple guns and a terrifying amount of ammunition, he walked through the front door. The young students froze in absolute terror as he began issuing chilling demands. In a calculated move, he ordered all the boys and adults to leave immediately. He deliberately barricaded the doors, trapping 10 little Amish girls inside the tiny room. They were completely defenseless against a heavily armed man with a dark plan. How would you react if a place of pure innocence was suddenly invaded by an unstoppable threat? Let me know below. If you are deeply unsettled by this terrifying hostage situation, drop a like right now. The police were rushing to the rural scene, but the horrifying barricade he built meant they were running out of time. The moment the freed boys ran from the school, they frantically alerted a nearby farm, screaming for help. Police cruisers immediately tore through the quiet country roads, their sirens piercing the usually silent air. Within minutes, state troopers surrounded the tiny wooden building. But Roberts was completely prepared for a siege. He had brought thick wooden planks, heavy bolts, and tools to board up the doors from the inside, creating an impenetrable fortress. Inside the classroom, the 10 little girls, ranging in age from 6 to 13, were lined up against the chalkboard. Their profound religious beliefs taught them never to fight back, leaving them entirely at the mercy of a disturbed man seeking vengeance for a past grievance that had absolutely nothing to do with them. Police negotiators desperately tried to establish contact, calling through the windows and begging Roberts to release the terrified children. The tension hanging over the rural field was incredibly suffocating. Every second that ticked by felt like an eternity. The heavily armed tactical teams knew they had to breach the building, but the reinforced doors made a quick rescue virtually impossible. They stood just a few feet away, separated by thin wooden walls, completely helpless to stop the ticking time bomb inside. Do you think you could maintain your composure while listening to a life-or-death standoff? Let me know below. If the suffocating tension of this terrifying barricade is keeping you hooked, hit that like button right now. The quiet standoff was suddenly broken by the most terrifying sound anyone could possibly imagine. Without any warning, Roberts abruptly ended the negotiations and turned his weapons on the innocent children. The deafening roar of gunfire shattered the peaceful morning, echoing across the vast green fields of nickel mines. Police troopers instantly charged the building, desperately smashing through the heavy wooden windows to stop the slaughter. But the damage was already done. In a matter of agonizing seconds, Roberts fired multiple rounds into the helpless young girls before finally turning the weapon on himself, taking his own life. The officers climbed through the shattered glass into a scene of absolute devastation. The tiny, innocent classroom had been transformed into a horrifying bloodbath. 5 beautiful young girls were tragically killed in the massacre, their bright futures stolen in an instant. 5 others were left severely wounded, fighting for their lives as emergency medical helicopters landed directly in the schoolyard. The sight of heavily bleeding children in traditional Amish clothing being rushed to modern hospitals was a deeply jarring image that broke the heart of the entire nation. The outside world could not comprehend how such a senseless act of pure evil could target the most peaceful people on earth. The grief that enveloped the tight-knit village was heavier than words could ever describe. How do you find the strength to keep breathing when the core of your community is violently destroyed? Let me know your thoughts below. If the sheer tragedy of this devastating day is breaking your heart, drop a like right now. What the grieving Amish community did next shocked the world far more than the crime itself. As the global media descended upon the grieving village, expecting anger and demands for harsh vengeance, they witnessed something profoundly beautiful and almost impossible to comprehend. Just hours after their beloved daughters were violently murdered, the deeply religious Amish community made a collective decision to completely forgive the killer. They did not just offer empty words. they took actual, immediate action. Grieving Amish elders walked directly to the home of Charles Carl Roberts' widow, offering her their deepest condolences and pure forgiveness. They recognized that she and her children were also suffering a horrific, sudden loss. When the brutal killer was finally buried, dozens of Amish men and women attended his funeral to shield his family from the prying cameras of the press. They even donated a portion of the massive charitable funds they received to the killer's devastated widow. This incredible act of grace completely stunned the world, proving that light can still exist in the absolute darkest moments of human history. The old wooden schoolhouse was carefully torn down, and the ground was cleared, allowing the community to quietly heal without a haunting monument to such profound violence. The nickel mines shooting remains one of the most heartbreaking tragedies in American history, yet the legacy left behind is one of unimaginable mercy. But while this tragedy showed the astonishing power of total forgiveness, our next devastating case offers absolutely no redemption, taking us to a terrifying night where a heavily armed prison guard snapped and ruthlessly slaughtered 13 people, including 5 of his own children. Number 5. George Banks. That heavily armed prison guard was George Banks, a man whose fractured mind would turn a quiet September night in Wilkes-Barre into a blood-soaked nightmare. The year is 1982, and the working-class city of Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, is about to experience a level of violence that will scar it forever. George Banks was a guard at a state correctional institution, a job that requires discipline and control. But outside the prison walls, his personal life was a chaotic and highly unusual web. He lived with multiple girlfriends and fathered several children, creating a complex, tense household that was completely isolated from the outside world. To his neighbors, he was quiet, perhaps a bit strange, but generally harmless. However, deep inside his mind, a dark paranoia was rapidly festering. He believed the world was out to get him, and his grip on reality was slowly slipping away with every passing day. Instead of seeking help, he began stockpiling ammunition and cleaning his military-style AR-15 rifle. The tension inside his home was thick, suffocating, and incredibly dangerous, like a bomb waiting for a single spark. His family walked on eggshells, entirely unaware that the man who was supposed to protect them was actually planning their execution. Have you ever sensed that someone close to you was hiding a dangerous, completely different personality beneath the surface? Let me know your thoughts below. If the rising dread of this impending massacre is making your blood run cold, drop a like right now. The spark finally ignited in the dead of night, and the horrific violence that followed was almost impossible to comprehend. On the very early morning of September 25th, the quiet darkness of the neighborhood was violently shattered. George Banks completely snapped. Dressed in military fatigue clothing and heavily armed, he walked through his own home with absolute, cold-blooded purpose. He did not hesitate, and he showed absolutely no mercy to the people who loved him. He raised his powerful rifle and began firing at point-blank range, moving methodically from room to room. He brutally murdered 3 of his own girlfriends as they frantically tried to understand what was happening. The sheer deafening noise of the rifle inside the small, confined house was terrifying, echoing through the empty streets outside. But the true horror of his rampage was directed at the most innocent victims imaginable. He turned his weapon on his own sleeping children. He slaughtered 5 of his biological kids, whose innocent lives ranged from just 1 to 11 years old. They had absolutely no chance to run or hide from the monster who was supposed to be their father. The absolute betrayal of a parent executing his own babies is a crime so profoundly evil it defies all human logic. Why do you think a father's protective instinct could suddenly warp into a desire for total, merciless annihilation? Let me know below. If you are deeply disturbed by the terrifying suddenness of this brutal rampage, hit that like button right now. The massacre inside the house was finally over, but his deadly mission of destruction was only just beginning. Leaving his house completely filled with unspeakable carnage, Banks stepped out into the cool night air. His thirst for blood was still not satisfied. He hijacked a vehicle and drove through the empty streets, extending his terrifying killing spree. He went to a second location, a mobile home park where another former girlfriend lived, and violently forced his way inside. He continued his relentless execution, shooting her, her mother, and a young nephew. Anyone who crossed his path was instantly gunned down in cold blood. In total, he took 13 innocent lives in one of the most horrific mass shootings in Pennsylvania history. The local police force was quickly overwhelmed by the massive scale of the tragedy. Panic erupted across the city as heavily armed tactical units desperately hunted down the rogue prison guard. They eventually tracked him to an empty, barricaded house, leading to an incredibly tense, hours-long standoff. Negotiators frantically tried to talk him down, listening to his bizarre, paranoid rants over the radio. He demanded a live radio broadcast to explain his actions to the world, claiming he was saving his children from a deeply corrupted society. He believed he was a savior, not a ruthless murderer. How do you negotiate with an armed killer who is completely convinced that his horrific crimes were an act of divine mercy? Let me know your thoughts below. If the sheer scale of this terrifying tragedy is keeping you on the edge of your seat, drop a like right now. The police finally made their move, leading to a dramatic capture and a deeply controversial trial. The exhausting standoff finally ended when police managed to trick Banks into surrendering without firing another shot. He was immediately taken into custody, but the nightmare for the devastated city was far from over. The courtroom trial was a grueling, highly emotional ordeal that forced the surviving relatives to relive the worst night of their lives. George Banks sat in the courtroom, sometimes rambling incoherently, presenting a deeply disturbing picture of a completely shattered mind. Despite his obvious psychological deterioration, the jury found him fully guilty on all counts of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to death for his monstrous crimes. However, decades of legal appeals and psychiatric evaluations followed, repeatedly delaying his execution. Medical experts eventually ruled that he was far too mentally incompetent to be legally put to death, leaving him to rot in a high-security state prison for the rest of his natural life. The Wilkes-Barre massacre remains a deep, haunting wound, a tragic reminder of the catastrophic damage that can occur when a deeply disturbed individual gains access to a military-grade weapon. 13 beautiful lives were violently erased in a single night of sheer, unstoppable madness. But while this terrifying massacre was carried out by a man holding a high-powered rifle in the dark of night, our next horrifying case takes us inside a brightly lit medical clinic, where a trusted doctor secretly ran a filthy, blood-soaked house of horrors, hiding jars of human remains right in his office refrigerators.
Number 6. Kermit Gosnell. Our next horrifying case takes us inside a brightly lit medical clinic, where a trusted doctor secretly ran a filthy, blood-soaked house of horrors, hiding jars of human remains right in his office refrigerators. The year is 2010, and the Women's Medical Society in West Philadelphia appears to be a standard, helpful neighborhood clinic. Dr. Kermit Gosnell presented himself as a pillar of the community, offering vital medical services to vulnerable, low-income women who had nowhere else to turn. But behind the locked doors of his facility, all standard medical ethics were completely abandoned. Women seeking help walked into a filthy, unsanitary environment where unsterilized equipment, blood-stained floors, and heavy, foul odors were the absolute norm. He preyed on the desperate, operating an illegal, late-term abortion mill that defied every safety regulation in the country. Gosnell functioned entirely above the law, employing untrained staff to administer heavy, dangerous medications that pushed his patients to the absolute brink of death. The sheer scale of his unchecked operation was staggering, turning a place meant for healing into a brutal, unregulated slaughterhouse. How does a licensed medical professional completely lose their humanity and turn a clinic into a deadly factory? Let me know your thoughts below. If the chilling reality of this betrayal of trust is making your skin crawl, drop a like on this video right now. The police eventually raided the facility for a completely different reason, but the nightmare they unexpectedly stumbled upon inside would traumatize them forever. In February of 2010, federal agents and local police suddenly raided the clinic. They were originally investigating Gosnell for illegally prescribing heavy painkillers, expecting to find nothing more than forged paperwork and stolen pills. But the moment they stepped inside the building, The overwhelming, sickening stench of decay hit them like a physical blow. The conditions were absolutely deplorable. Medical waste bags were piled high in the hallways, and the emergency exit was permanently padlocked shut. As investigators carefully searched the back rooms, the true, macabre nature of Gosnell's operation was finally dragged into the light. Inside the clinic's refrigerators, sitting right next to employee lunches, officers found something completely unimaginable. They discovered dozens of glass jars filled with the severed limbs and organs of aborted fetuses. It was a grotesque, unbelievable collection of human remains kept entirely as twisted trophies. The sheer volume of evidence pointed to a calculated, long-running pattern of absolute butchery. The medical facility was instantly shut down, and a massive homicide investigation was launched into the darkest corners of the doctor's terrifying practice. The officers who walked through those doors that day would require extensive psychological counseling just to cope with the unbelievable horrors they witnessed. What possesses a person to keep such horrifying trophies of their own brutal crimes? Let me know your thoughts below. If the deeply disturbing details of this unsanitary house of horrors are leaving you speechless, hit that like button right now. As the investigators began interviewing his former frightened staff, they uncovered a specific, deeply murderous practice that would shock the entire world. The subsequent police investigation revealed details so deeply monstrous that they completely defied all human comprehension. Testimonies from his terrified, poorly trained staff painted a horrifying picture of absolute, unmitigated evil happening daily. Dr. Gosnell was routinely performing highly illegal late-term abortions far past the state's legal limit. Tragically, many of these illicit procedures resulted in fully viable infants being born completely alive, moving, and breathing. But instead of providing the immediate, life-saving medical care required by law, Gosnell enacted his own cold-blooded execution method. With terrifying calmness, he would take a pair of heavy surgical scissors and forcefully sever the spinal cords of these helpless, living infants, instantly murdering them. He casually referred to this brutal practice as simply ensuring fetal demise. The sheer, calculated repetition of these murders turned his clinic into an active, unchecked killing floor hidden in plain sight. One staff member tearfully testified about a baby so large it was described as looking like it could easily walk to the bus stop, only to be mercilessly killed moments after taking its very first breath. The doctor had entirely stripped away the sanctity of human life, treating these living, breathing infants as nothing more than disposable medical waste. How could numerous staff members witness this daily slaughter and remain completely silent for so many years? Let me know your thoughts below. If the profound tragedy of these innocent, stolen lives is breaking your heart, drop a like right now. The massive murder trial finally brought the full, horrifying weight of his actions to the world, leading to an unforgettable verdict. The highly publicized trial of Kermit Gosnell forced the nation to confront an unprecedented level of medical depravity. The courtroom was filled with overwhelming emotion as the sheer brutality of his crimes was laid bare for the jury. Despite the mountain of gruesome evidence and the tearful testimonies of his own former employees, Gosnell showed absolutely no remorse for the innocent lives he so ruthlessly extinguished. In 2013, the jury delivered their final, crushing decision. He was found entirely guilty of 3 counts of first-degree murder for the horrific killings of the infants born alive, along with involuntary manslaughter for the death of a female patient who suffered a fatal overdose under his negligent care. Facing the terrifying prospect of the death penalty, he immediately agreed to give up his right to an appeal in exchange for a sentence of life in prison without the absolute possibility of parole. The clinic was permanently shuttered and demolished, but the dark, enduring legacy of the West Philadelphia House of Horrors will forever remain a deeply chilling stain on the medical profession. The devastating case stands as a terrifying reminder of what happens when absolute greed completely overrides fundamental human morality and the duty to protect life. But while this horrifying medical massacre happened secretly behind the closed doors of a deceptive clinic, our next unimaginable tragedy violently erupted inside a sacred, peaceful place of worship, where a deeply hateful man walked in with a heavy rifle and ruthlessly targeted an innocent religious community gathered for morning prayer.
Number 7. Tree of Life Synagogue Shooting. That deeply hateful man walked directly into a sacred, peaceful place of worship with a heavy rifle, ruthlessly targeting an innocent religious community gathered for morning prayer. The date is October 27, 2018, and a cold rain is falling over the quiet, welcoming neighborhood of Squirrel Hill in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Inside the historic Tree of Life Synagogue, 3 separate congregations are peacefully holding their Saturday Sabbath services. It is a morning meant for quiet reflection, community connection, and profound faith. But outside in the dreary weather, a man named Robert Bowers is parking his vehicle, carrying an unimaginable darkness in his heart. Consumed by deeply toxic online radicalization and extreme anti-Semitic hatred, he is heavily armed with a high-powered assault rifle and 3 handguns. He steps through the heavy glass doors into the warm, inviting sanctuary, shattering the absolute sanctity of the building. The worshippers, many of whom are elderly and highly vulnerable, are completely unaware that an unstoppable force of pure, calculated evil has just breached their most sacred space. He did not come to simply make a threatening political statement. He walked into the synagogue with the singular, cold-blooded goal of total human annihilation. How do you think a person's mind becomes so entirely consumed by blind hatred that they attack helpless people in prayer? Let me know your thoughts below. If the rising, suffocating tension of this impending nightmare is holding your attention, drop a like right now. The terrifying rampage that followed would leave the entire world in a state of absolute, unbreakable shock. Without a single warning or hesitation, the brutal massacre began. Bowers moved systematically through the quiet halls of the synagogue, raising his powerful weapon and opening fire on the unsuspecting worshippers. The deafening, terrifying roar of the heavy rifle echoed violently through the large, open sanctuary, immediately replacing the soft sounds of prayer with unimaginable chaos and sheer terror. Panicked congregants frantically scrambled for cover, desperately trying to hide behind wooden pews and in tight closets. But the killer was absolutely relentless, showing zero mercy as he hunted down the terrified survivors. 11 entirely innocent people, ranging in age from 54 to 97 years old, were mercilessly gunned down in cold blood. Among the fallen were devoted grandparents, loving siblings, and pillars of the local community. Survivors lay completely motionless on the cold floor, making frantic, whispered calls to emergency services while listening to the slow, heavy footsteps of the killer moving ever closer to their hiding spots. In just a matter of minutes, the peaceful place of worship was transformed into a gruesome, blood-soaked war zone. It quickly became the absolute deadliest anti-Semitic attack in the entire history of the United States. What goes through your mind when you are trapped in a dark room, silently praying that a killer does not open the door? Let me know below. If the devastating heartbreak of this senseless tragedy is leaving you completely speechless, hit that like button right now. The police were heavily mobilized and quickly arriving on the chaotic scene, setting the stage for a massive, terrifying firefight. Within minutes of the very first frantic emergency calls, brave local police officers and heavily armed tactical units completely swarmed the perimeter of the historic synagogue. Knowing that innocent people were still actively bleeding inside, these officers did not wait for a safe, coordinated plan. They rushed directly into the line of fire, breaching the dark, echoing halls to confront the heavily armed shooter. A fierce, terrifying gun battle immediately erupted inside the sacred building. Bowers barricaded himself on an upper floor, raining heavy gunfire down upon the rescue teams. During the intense, chaotic shootout, multiple heroic police officers were severely wounded by flying shrapnel and direct rifle hits. Despite their serious injuries, they continued to push forward, desperately dragging terrified, trapped hostages out of the building and into the pouring rain. Eventually, the tactical teams managed to shoot and critically wound the gunman, forcing his brutal surrender. He crawled out of the darkness and was dragged from the sanctuary, leaving a horrific scene of unimaginable devastation behind him. The entire world watched in profound horror as the full, staggering scale of the tragedy was finally broadcast across global news networks. How much courage does it actually take to willingly run into a dark building where a high-powered rifle is actively firing? Let me know your thoughts below. If the sheer, incredible bravery of these first responders is earning your absolute respect, drop a like right now. The killer survived his severe wounds, meaning the devastated families would eventually have to face him in a grueling, highly emotional trial. The agonizing pursuit of justice took several long years, forcing the deeply traumatized survivors to repeatedly relive the most terrifying morning of their entire lives. During the highly publicized federal trial in the summer of 2023, the court heard completely heartbreaking testimonies from those who narrowly escaped the deadly rampage. The overwhelming digital footprint of Robert Bowers was exposed, revealing a deeply disturbed man who was thoroughly brainwashed by toxic online echo chambers. Despite sitting just a few feet away from the grieving families of his 11 victims, he never showed a single ounce of genuine human remorse. The federal jury found him definitively guilty on all 63 major charges, including severe hate crimes resulting in massive loss of life. They delivered the ultimate punishment, officially sentencing him to death for orchestrating the most horrific anti-Semitic massacre in American history. The Tree of Life Synagogue remains a profound symbol of unimaginable loss, yet the beautiful community of Pittsburgh responded with incredible resilience, proving that blind hatred will never completely extinguish the powerful light of human unity. This devastating case highlighted the severe dangers of radicalized, hateful adults targeting peaceful groups in broad daylight. But our next terrifying true crime story proves that pure evil does not always come from grown, radicalized men. Sometimes, it hides behind the deceptively innocent face of an ordinary teenager, who quietly stalked the night to brutally assault and murder unsuspecting women in the supposed absolute safety of their own locked homes. Number 8. Harvey Robinson. Sometimes, pure evil hides behind the deceptively innocent face of an ordinary teenager, who quietly stalks the night to brutally assault and murder unsuspecting women in the absolute safety of their locked homes. The year is 1992, and the peaceful city of Allentown, Pennsylvania, is slowly suffocating under a thick blanket of unprecedented terror. A vicious, phantom-like predator is actively prowling the quiet suburban streets under the cover of absolute darkness. He targets vulnerable women who are completely alone, sleeping quietly in what should be the most secure place on earth. The chilling reality that someone is easily bypassing locked doors and heavily sealed windows sends waves of intense panic through the entire community. Residents begin buying heavy security systems and sleeping with weapons near their beds, terrified they might be the next target on his deadly list. But the most horrifying aspect of this nightmare is the identity of the brutal attacker. The monster haunting their dreams is not a hardened criminal, but a seemingly ordinary high school student. Harvey Robinson is just 17 years old, a young man who seamlessly blends into the background of everyday neighborhood life while hiding a deeply psychotic, murderous urge. How can a boy who has barely started his own life possess such a deeply ingrained desire to violently destroy the lives of innocent strangers? Let me know your thoughts below. If the terrifying thought of a midnight intruder is making your heart race, drop a like right now. The sheer brutality of his sudden attacks would soon escalate into an unstoppable, blood-soaked rampage. Harvey Robinson did not just stumble into these horrific crimes. He was a calculated and deeply patient predator. Under the glow of the streetlights, he quietly stalked his targets, memorizing their routines and searching for the perfect moment to strike. When the time was right, he forcefully breached their homes, transforming their personal sanctuaries into chambers of unimaginable horror. Once inside, the teenager overpowered adult women with a shocking level of sheer, raw violence. He subjected his terrified victims to brutal, merciless sexual assaults before taking their lives with cold, calculated precision. Over the course of a few agonizing months, he successfully murdered 3 innocent women, leaving a trail of absolute devastation in his wake. The local police force was completely baffled by the extreme savagery of the crime scenes. Experienced detectives working the gruesome cases naturally assumed they were hunting a much older, highly experienced serial killer with a long history of extreme violence. They never suspected that the highly organized psychopath terrorizing their city was a local teenager who was barely old enough to drive a car. Robinson was entirely invisible, hiding in plain sight while his brutal body count continued to rapidly climb. Why do you think experienced investigators completely overlook the possibility that pure evil can exist in someone so incredibly young? Let me know your thoughts below. If the silent, creeping dread of this teenager's deadly game is keeping you hooked, hit that like button right now. The police would eventually catch an unexpected break, leading to a frantic, life-or-death confrontation. The massive, citywide manhunt reached a boiling point when the teenage monster made a critical, arrogant mistake. Believing he was entirely invincible, Robinson boldly broke into yet another home, intent on claiming his next innocent victim. But this time, the terrified woman fought back with an incredible, desperate surge of pure adrenaline. She miraculously survived the vicious assault, providing the frantic police with a crucial description of her attacker. Additionally, detectives managed to lift a highly incriminating fingerprint from one of the previous gruesome crime scenes. When they finally matched that vital print to Harvey Robinson, the entire police department was thrown into a state of absolute shock. Heavily armed officers quickly descended upon the unsuspecting teenager, dragging him out of his seemingly normal life and into an interrogation room. The terrifying revelation that the elusive, brutal serial killer was merely 18 years old completely paralyzed the terrified city. Parents looked at their own teenage sons with sudden, sickening apprehension. The absolute lack of empathy staring back from his cold, youthful eyes was deeply disturbing even to the most seasoned homicide detectives. He showed absolutely no remorse for the beautiful lives he had violently stolen in the dark. How does a community ever recover from the horrifying realization that a ruthless monster was sitting right next to their children in a high school classroom? Let me know below. If the shocking capture of this incredibly young predator is leaving you stunned, drop a like right now. The unprecedented trial that followed would make dark, unforgettable legal history in the state. The highly anticipated murder trial of Harvey Robinson was a deeply emotional and incredibly disturbing spectacle. Prosecutors systematically laid out the horrifying, undeniable evidence of his brutal midnight rampages, exposing the sheer depth of his calculated depravity. Because his horrific crimes were so exceptionally savage, the prosecution aggressively pushed for the ultimate punishment, despite his incredibly young age. The jury listened in absolute horror as the full, gruesome details of his home invasions were brought into the bright light of the courtroom. In the end, there was no sympathy for the teenage killer. He was found definitively guilty of the brutal rapes and murders, and the judge handed down the harshest possible sentence. Harvey Robinson officially became the youngest convicted serial killer in the entire history of Pennsylvania to be sent directly to death row. Today, he remains locked away in a maximum security cell, a permanent ghost isolated from the society he so violently terrorized. His terrifying case completely destroyed the comforting illusion that extreme, calculated evil is restricted to older, hardened criminals. Allentown eventually regained its quiet peace, but the deep, psychological scars left by the teenage monster will forever haunt the neighborhoods he stalked. But while this terrifying teenager actively hunted his victims in the quiet suburbs, our next deeply sickening case takes us to a foul-smelling apartment in the heart of the city, where angry neighbors continuously complained about a horrific, lingering odor, completely unaware that the quiet man next door was hiding a massive, rotting collection of human corpses right under his own bed. Number 9. Harrison Graham. Those angry neighbors continuously complained about a horrific, lingering odor, completely unaware that the quiet man next door was hiding a massive, rotting collection of human corpses right under his own bed. The year is 1987. And the sweltering heat of a Philadelphia summer is beating down on a cramped apartment building. The air inside the narrow hallways is suffocating, carrying a foul, sickening stench that simply refuses to fade. Disgusted tenants are constantly complaining about an overwhelming smell of decay seeping out from under the door of one specific unit. The man living inside is Harrison Graham, a quiet, strange individual who keeps entirely to himself. He politely deflects the angry complaints, making up endless excuses about broken plumbing and spoiled food. To the outside world, he is just a harmless eccentric, but behind his heavily locked door lies a gruesome secret of unimaginable proportions. He is actively sharing his tiny, claustrophobic living space with the brutalized victims of his own horrific crimes. He preys on vulnerable women struggling on the dark city streets, luring them in with false promises of safety. Once they step inside his suffocating apartment, they are never seen alive again. Why do you think people are so quick to accept simple excuses for things that clearly feel deeply wrong? Let me know below. If the sickening reality of this foul-smelling apartment is making you hold your breath, drop a like right now. The police finally arrived to investigate the overwhelming stench, and the terrifying scene waiting behind that wooden door would completely shatter their minds. When the building management could no longer ignore the horrific complaints, they called the authorities to inspect the apartment. As police officers forced their way inside, they were instantly hit by a physical wall of putrid odor that forced them to desperately gasp for fresh air. The tiny apartment was a chaotic disaster of unimaginable filth, filled with towering piles of garbage and thick swarms of flies. As detectives began pulling back the heavy layers of trash, the true, sinister nature of the smell was finally dragged into the light. Hidden beneath a massive pile of debris right in the middle of the floor was the decomposing body of a murdered woman. The officers were completely stunned, but the absolute nightmare was only just beginning. As they continued their grim, sickening search, they found another lifeless victim shoved deep inside a small closet. Then, they looked underneath Graham's own mattress. He had been sleeping peacefully every single night directly on top of multiple rotting human corpses. He was a literal collector of the dead, living in perfect harmony with the horrifying results of his own brutal urges. In total, police discovered the tragic remains of 7 different women stuffed into the tiny corners of the apartment. How can a human being sleep peacefully while surrounded by the rotting bodies of his own victims? Let me know below. If the sheer depravity of this unbelievable discovery is making your stomach turn, hit that like button right now. The desperate hunt to capture this twisted serial killer would quickly spark a massive, terrifying citywide panic. Harrison Graham was nowhere to be found when the gruesome raid took place. He had sensed the walls closing in and vanished into the unforgiving labyrinth of the Philadelphia streets. The shock of the discovery sent immediate waves of panic through the entire city. Local news channels repeatedly flashed the terrifying headline of a brutal serial killer who collected bodies like twisted trophies. Residents of the neighborhood were paralyzed by fear, realizing that the quiet, unassuming man they had casually passed on the sidewalks was actually a ruthless predator. He had strangled his victims with his bare hands, overpowering them in the dark before adding them to his macabre collection. The massive police manhunt was incredibly intense, with heavily armed officers frantically searching abandoned buildings, dark alleyways, and local shelters. The pressure to catch the elusive killer before he claimed an 8th victim was absolutely suffocating. For over a week, Graham remained a terrifying ghost, hiding in the shadows of the very city he had deeply traumatized. Eventually, exhausted and completely out of options, he walked into a local restaurant and was quickly recognized. He was arrested without a violent struggle, his eerily calm demeanor deeply chilling the arresting officers. Can you imagine the absolute terror of knowing a prolific serial killer is freely roaming your neighborhood streets at night? Let me know below. If the intense, heart-pounding manhunt for this elusive monster is keeping you firmly on the edge of your seat, drop a like right now. The massive trial would force the deeply traumatized families to confront the sickening reality of his twisted collection. The trial of Harrison Graham was an incredibly dark and disturbing chapter in Pennsylvania legal history. Prosecutors presented the overwhelming, deeply sickening evidence of his cramped, corpse-filled apartment, highlighting the sheer indignity his victims suffered. His defense attorneys attempted to argue that Graham was suffering from severe psychological trauma and crippling drug addiction, pointing to his heavily degraded mental state as the root cause of his terrifying actions. However, the judge and the public could not look past the cold, calculated reality of a man who strangled 7 women and casually slept on top of their rotting remains. The pure, undeniable horror of his actions completely overshadowed any plea for mercy. He was found definitively guilty of all 7 brutal murders and the abuse of their corpses. Graham was ultimately sentenced to death, though this was later reduced to life in prison without the absolute possibility of parole after endless legal appeals. The infamous apartment building was completely gutted and sanitized, but the dark, terrifying legacy of the corpse collector will forever haunt the city of Philadelphia. His horrifying case proves that the most twisted monsters often hide in the most ordinary, overlooked places, quietly building their nightmares right behind a locked door. But while this terrifying killer silently hoarded his victims in a cramped, foul-smelling room, our next devastating case bursts violently into the open, featuring a highly educated lawyer who embarked on a rapid, racially fueled shooting spree across multiple towns, turning a quiet afternoon into a chaotic, 2-hour trail of blood and hatred.
Number 10. Richard Baumhammers. A highly educated lawyer who embarked on a rapid, racially fueled shooting spree across multiple towns, turning a quiet afternoon into a chaotic, 2-hour trail of blood and hatred. The year is 2000, and the bustling city of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, is about to witness an unprecedented wave of targeted domestic terrorism. Richard Baumhammers was a man of high status, working as an immigration lawyer. It is a deeply chilling irony that a man whose entire profession involved helping foreigners transition into a new country harbored a violently toxic, deep-seated hatred for minorities. Beneath his polished exterior, he was quietly consumed by pure racist extremism. On a quiet April afternoon, his festering anger finally exploded into unstoppable violence. He grabbed his high-powered revolver, stepped out of his comfortable home, and walked directly next door. His very first target was his neighbor, a kind Jewish woman who had known him since he was a child. Without a single moment of hesitation, he brutally shot her dead inside her own home. To leave a terrifying message of his hateful motives, he painted a large red swastika on her property before casually walking away to continue his deadly mission. Why do you think a person sworn to uphold the law could suddenly become its most terrifying violator? Let me know your thoughts below. If the shocking suddenness of this brutal betrayal has you on edge, drop a like right now. The terrifying rampage was only just beginning, and his vehicle was heading toward a busy shopping center. Leaving his quiet neighborhood completely shattered, Baumhammers got into his vehicle and began hunting down his next innocent victims. He drove to a local Indian grocery store, his mind entirely consumed by absolute, blind prejudice. He casually walked through the front doors, raised his deadly weapon, and fired multiple shots. He brutally murdered a young Indian man working behind the counter and critically paralyzed another innocent shopper, forever changing his life in a matter of terrifying seconds. The lawyer did not stop to look at the devastation he caused. He simply turned around and drove to his next target. He targeted a nearby Chinese restaurant, forcefully walking inside to execute the helpless manager and a hard-working Vietnamese cook. The sheer ruthless efficiency of his unprovoked attacks plunged the surrounding towns into a state of total, gripping panic. Emergency dispatchers were overwhelmed by frantic calls coming from multiple different locations, creating massive confusion for the rapidly deploying police units. Nobody knew where the heavily armed killer was heading next or who he was going to target. The horrific reality that a man was actively hunting people based entirely on their race spread like wildfire, causing terrified businesses to desperately lock their doors. Would you know what to do if a peaceful afternoon suddenly erupted into a heavily armed, chaotic citywide emergency? Let me know below. If the sheer speed and terror of this 2-hour shooting spree is making your heart race, hit that like button right now. The killer then turned his sights on a local martial arts studio, and police were running out of time. The blood-soaked trail of terror eventually led the rogue lawyer to a quiet martial arts studio in a neighboring town. Walking inside with the same cold, calculating demeanor, he immediately identified an African-American man enjoying a peaceful day. With absolutely zero warning, Baumhammers raised his gun and ruthlessly ended another beautiful life. In just 2 agonizing hours, this highly educated professional had driven across 15 miles, violently murdering 5 innocent people and permanently paralyzing a 6th. His victims included a Jewish woman, 2 Indian immigrants, a Vietnamese immigrant, a Chinese immigrant, and an African-American man. It was an unprecedented, calculated strike against the diverse fabric of the entire community. Fortunately, the massive police response was finally closing the gap. Heavily armed officers spotted his vehicle and swiftly intercepted him before he could continue his monstrous rampage. He was dragged out of his car and arrested on the spot, offering absolutely no resistance and showing zero remorse for the immense suffering he had just caused. The physical shooting had stopped, but the profound emotional damage inflicted upon the devastated city was immeasurable. The brutal hate crime forced the nation to take a long look at the terrifying consequences of unchecked prejudice. How do communities rebuild trust and a sense of safety after such a deeply targeted, hateful attack shatters their world? Let me know your thoughts below. If you are incredibly relieved that the police finally stopped this monster, drop a like right now. The resulting trial was an intense, emotional battlefield, and the final verdict would deliver the absolute maximum punishment. The highly anticipated murder trial of Richard Baumhammers forced the shattered community to confront the pure, unadulterated evil that drove his actions. His legal defense desperately tried to argue that the former immigration lawyer was suffering from severe mental illness, attempting to spare him from the ultimate penalty. However, the overwhelming evidence of his calculated movements, his carefully selected victims, and the hate symbols he intentionally left behind completely destroyed any claim of sudden insanity. The jury saw him exactly for what he was, a highly organized, racist terrorist who knew exactly what he was doing every single time he pulled the trigger. They deliberated and quickly found him guilty of 5 counts of first-degree murder, along with a multitude of severe hate crimes. He was officially sentenced to death, joining the darkest ranks of criminals waiting on Pennsylvania's death row. Today, he remains locked in a maximum security prison, entirely isolated from the diverse society he so violently despised. The horrific events of that April afternoon serve as a deeply chilling reminder that extreme hatred can fester within anyone, regardless of their education, wealth, or prestigious social standing. 5 innocent lives were erased in a matter of minutes simply because a deeply flawed man could not tolerate the beautiful diversity of his own community. But while this terrifying rampage was fueled by deep-seated hatred in broad daylight, our next chilling investigation takes us deep into an isolated, snow-covered mountain pass, where a group of experienced travelers suddenly vanished into the freezing night, leaving behind a terrifying mystery that absolutely defies all logical explanation.